I was watching the evening news in my living room. My son-in-law walked in, ripped the TV off the wall, and smashed it on the floor. "Get lost, old lady. This is my house now." My daughter, my own child, looked at the carpet. I stood up, picked up my purse, walked past the shattered glass, and locked the door behind me. The next day, a stranger in an expensive suit knocked on the door. He rang the bell. "Welcome to my story. I share what happens when quiet women stop asking for permission and start enforcing consequences. If you've ever been dismissed, disrespected, or told you don't matter, stay with me. You'll want to hear how this ends." That Wednesday evening, the sound of breaking glass hit the living room like an explosion. I was sitting in my green velvet armchair, the one I'd bought with the first Social Security check I received after my husband Robert passed away 2 years ago. A cup of Earl Grey tea cooled on the end table beside me, and the kitchen still held the faint sweetness of the apple pie I'd baked that afternoon. The television murmured softly with the 6 o'clock news, and this was my sanctuary, the hour when my joints finally eased, when I could simply exist, serving no one, answering to no one. The front door slammed open like a thunderclap. I didn't flinch. I knew exactly who it was. Barry Grayson stormed into my house as if he owned every square inch of it. Heavy footsteps, aggressive energy. Behind him, my daughter Laura trailed like a shadow, her arms weighed down with shopping bags, her shoulders hunched, her eyes fixed on the floor, as though apologizing for taking up oxygen. I didn't move. Barry planted himself directly in front of the television, blocking my view. He stood there, chest heaving, nostrils flared, the way he always did when he wanted to establish dominance. His hand shot out. He grabbed the power cord and yanked it from the wall. Then, with both hands, he lifted the television off its mount. "What are you—" He didn't let me finish. He hurled the TV to the hardwood floor. The screen exploded into a spiderweb of cracks. Glass scattered across the room like shrapnel, skittering under the couch, beneath the coffee table, glittering in the lamplight, like 1,000 tiny accusations. "Get lost, old lady," he shouted, his voice filling every corner of the room. "This is my living room now. My house. You're just taking up space." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear his breathing, short, sharp, entitled, as if his tantrum had somehow purchased him authority, as if volume equaled ownership. Very slowly, I turned my gaze toward Laura. She stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, her knuckles bone white where they gripped the handles of those shopping bags. Our eyes met across the wreckage. I waited. I waited for the simplest thing in the world, for my daughter, my own child, to say, "Don't you dare talk to my mother like that. This is her house. Get out." Anything. Laura lowered her head. She adjusted the strap of one of the bags, as if something inside had shifted and needed her immediate attention. That small gesture, that silent surrender, struck harder than any scream could have. Barry's shout had been noise. My daughter's silence, that was betrayal. A cold clarity washed over me. Not anger, not shame. Just a sharp, icy sobriety that cut through 43 years of motherhood, of compromise, of keeping the peace at my own expense. 35 years at the county recorder's office had taught me one unshakable truth. Words don't matter. Documents always do. I stood. My knees clicked audibly in the thick silence. In that moment, the sound felt formal, like a gavel striking wood, like the closing of a courtroom door. Barry was already sprawled across my couch, one arm draped over the back, unbuttoning the top button of his shirt as he reached for a can of soda he'd left on the coffee table. He didn't even look at me. In his world, I had long ceased to be a person. I was furniture, wallpaper. An inconvenience he tolerated because I came with the house. I walked past him without a word. I turned down the hallway and stepped into my bedroom, not to hide, not to weep, not to collapse under the weight of humiliation as they probably expected. I opened the bottom drawer of my oak dresser and pulled out a stiff leather document pouch, the kind used for bank business and legal filings. From beneath a stack of folded linens, I retrieved a set of keys and a blue elastic-banded folder. My finger slid over the rough, familiar texture of the papers inside. A bill of sale, old but valid. A current deed of title, recorded with the county clerk's office. Owner, Carrie Elizabeth Allen. No co-signers, no secondary names, no mortgage, paid in full since 1989. The paper was yellowed at the edges, softened by time. But its power? Ironclad. I glanced at myself in the mirror. Short gray hair, neatly combed. Reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around my neck. Linen trousers and a navy cardigan. Sensible shoes. I looked like the grandmother who bakes cookies and asks about homework. That had always been my greatest tactical advantage. As long as Grandma feeds the wolves, they feel like kings. But the moment Grandma closes the lid on the pot, the king's paws turn to putty. I returned to the living room, folder tucked under my arm, keys cold and solid in my palm. Barry had already switched to the sports channel. The volume was cranked to an obnoxious level. Laura was in the kitchen now, clattering dishes. Voluntary noise to fill the void where her voice should have been. I walked toward the front door. My heel clicked against the hardwood with each step. Barry turned his head just enough to smirk at me. He raised his soda can in a mock salute. "Taking a stroll, Carrie," he sneered. "Don't get lost. At your age, you might forget where you live." I didn't answer. I reached the door and turned the deadbolt. For just a second, I paused and looked around, at the framed photograph of the Smoky Mountains on the wall, at the rug I vacuumed every Saturday morning, at the couch my husband and I had picked out together 30 years ago. I looked at my son-in-law's back, at my daughter's shadow moving soundlessly in the kitchen. I touched the cluster of keys in my pocket. The cold metal was invigorating. I walked out, closing the door behind me, not with a slam, but quietly, firmly, like setting a period at the end of a sentence. Outside, the November air was crisp and clear. I wasn't cold. I exhaled, watching my breath fog in the glow of the porch light. Then I locked the front gate from the outside, something I'd never done before. I walked 3 blocks to the avenue and raised my hand. A taxi pulled up within seconds. The driver, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to, ma'am?" "The Grand Hyatt, downtown, please." She nodded and pulled into traffic. I sat in the back seat, my purse on my lap, the document folder beside me. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed softly in the darkness. My hands didn't tremble from fear. They trembled from activation. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Julian V. Leo, Esq. Julian had been my supervisor at the county clerk's office 20 years ago. Now he was a semi-retired property attorney, still sharp, still respected, still the man you called when you needed the law on your side, and you needed it fast. The phone rang 3 times. "Carrie?" His voice was warm but surprised. "It's almost 9 o'clock. What's wrong?" I looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. "I woke up, Julian. I need your help." A pause. "I have depositions tomorrow morning." "Why the rush?" "My mental and property health." Another pause. Longer this time. Julian knew me. We'd worked side by side for over a decade. I didn't make dramatic phone calls. I didn't exaggerate. If I was calling him at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, it was serious. "I'm listening." "I need to evict 2 tenants from 428 Maple Street." "But you live with your daughter and son-in-law." "Exactly." Silence. Then understanding. "What did he do, Carrie?" I kept my voice steady, clinical, the way I used to speak when filing legal documents. "He smashed my television, threw it to the floor and destroyed it. Then he told me to get lost, old lady, and claimed my living room as his." My daughter said nothing, so I left. And I will not return to my own home until they are gone. Julian's voice softened, but there was steel beneath it. That's abuse, Carrie. I don't need pity, Julian. I need the law. The house is in your name? Title recorded June 14th, 1982. No mortgage since 1989. No lease agreement. They've lived there rent-free for 3 years and 7 months. I heard him exhale, half relief, half admiration. Then we have everything we need. I'll draft a notice to quit. Termination of gratuitous occupancy. You'll need personal service. Send someone tomorrow morning, early. I'll send Ted Cruz, my junior associate. Sharp, professional, delivers clearly. He won't be intimidated. Good. Include language stating they have 7 days to vacate, and specify that failure to comply will result in sheriff-supervised removal. Are you certain about this, Carrie? I thought of the shattered glass on my living room floor, of my daughter's silence, of Barry's smirk. Words don't matter, Julian. Documents always do. Understood. I'll have the papers ready by 8 a.m. Thank you. I ended the call and immediately dialed my bank's 24-hour customer service line. Automated system. I pressed through the menu until I reached a live representative. This is Carrie Allen, primary account holder. I need an immediate freeze on joint checking account number 4082. May I ask the reason, Mrs. Allen? Unauthorized withdrawals, pending dispute resolution. I see you share this account with Laura Allen Grayson. Correct. The freeze stands. Primary holder authority supersedes. Understood. The account is frozen effective immediately. Thank you. Next, I called the internet provider. Service suspension, account MT4438, effective tomorrow at 5 p.m. Then the cable company. Same request. Then the electric company. Account review. Suspend non-essential services pending verification. Each operator asked the same question. Are you sure, Mom? And I gave the same answer. I'm the account holder. I'm sure. The taxi pulled up to the Grand Hyatt 20 minutes later. I paid the fare, tipped generously, and walked through the glass doors into the warm, anonymous luxury of the lobby. I checked in under my own name. They gave me a small suite on the 8th floor. Clean, impersonal, quiet. I didn't unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed with a document folder open in my lap. Deed, title insurance, bank statements, utility bills, everything in perfect order, everything in my name. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I'd been preparing for this moment since the day Laura said, I do, to a man who thought charm was the same as character, and volume was the same as authority. Tomorrow, a stranger in a suit would ring the doorbell at 428 Maple Street, and Barry Grayson's entire world would shatter far more completely than any television ever could. The hotel room was silent except for the hum of the heating unit and the distant murmur of traffic 8 floors below. I sat on the edge of the bed, the document folder spread open across my lap like a battle plan. Deed. Title insurance certificate. Bank statements dating back 3 years. Utility bills, all in my name, every single one. Everything was in perfect order. Everything had always been in order. That was the difference between Barry and me. He operated on volume and entitlement. I operated on documentation and precision. He thought ownership was declared. I knew it was recorded. In ink, on paper, filed with the county, stamped and sealed and utterly indisputable. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 10:47 p.m. By now, Barry would be asleep on my couch, feet kicked up, remote control still in his hand. Laura would be lying awake in the bedroom, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that what happened tonight was somehow normal, that her mother overreacted, that things would be fine in the morning. They wouldn't be. Because tomorrow morning, at precisely 9:00 a.m., a man in a tailored suit would ring the doorbell at 428 Maple Street. And Barry Grayson's illusion of power would crumble the moment he touched those papers. I closed the folder and set it on the nightstand beside me. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Draft complete. Ted will serve at 9 a.m. sharp. Get some rest, Carrie. Tomorrow the law does the talking. I typed back. Thank you, Julian. I owe you. His response came immediately. You don't owe me anything. You're doing what you should have done years ago. I set the phone down and looked around the hotel room. Beige walls, generic landscape painting, starched white sheets that smelled like industrial detergent. It was temporary, impersonal, but it was mine, paid for with my own credit card, occupied by my own choice, free from the sound of breaking glass and cruel laughter. I thought about Laura, my daughter, my only child, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, sent off to college with a trunk full of dreams and a heart full of hope. When had she become so small? When had she learned to fold herself into silence, to make herself invisible, to apologize for existing in her own mother's house? The answer, I knew, was gradual. It had happened in inches. A dismissed opinion here, a raised voice there. A pattern of small erasures that accumulated over years until my daughter had become a shadow of herself. And I had let it happen because I didn't want to interfere, didn't want to be the overbearing mother-in-law, didn't want to risk losing her. But tonight, watching her look at the floor while her husband destroyed my property and my dignity, I realized something. I'd already lost her, and the only way to get her back was to stop enabling the man who'd taken her from me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. Sleep was for people who weren't sure of their next move. I'd spent 2 years, since the day Barry moved into my house, watching, documenting, preparing. I'd kept every receipt, every bank statement, every utility bill. I'd noted every dismissive comment, every act of financial manipulation. Every moment, Laura shrank a little smaller. I'd been building a case without even realizing it, because 35 years at the county recorder's office had taught me something Barry would never understand. The most devastating battles aren't fought with fists or shouting. They're fought with paperwork, filed in triplicate, stamped with official seals, and enforced by officers of the court. Violence is loud and temporary. Documentation is quiet and permanent. At some point in the early hours of the morning, I must have drifted off because I woke to pale sunlight filtering through the hotel curtains. My phone alarm was buzzing. 7:30 a.m. I silenced it and sat up, my body stiff, but my mind clear. Today, the stranger in the suit would knock on the door. Today, Barry would learn that ownership isn't claimed, is proven. Today, my daughter would have to choose between the man who diminished her and the mother who refused to disappear. I stood, smoothed the wrinkles from my clothes, and walked to the window. The city stretched out below me, awake, busy, indifferent to the small personal reckonings happening in apartments and houses across its sprawl. Somewhere out there, Ted Cruz was reviewing the eviction notice one final time, straightening his tie, gathering his briefcase. Somewhere out there, Barry was waking up on my couch, completely unaware that his free ride was about to end. And somewhere out there, my daughter was brewing coffee in my kitchen, still trying to convince herself that silence was the same as peace. I picked up my phone and sent one final text to Julian. I'm ready. Let's proceed. His response was immediate. Ted is en route. ETA, 9:14 a.m. Stay strong, Carrie. Justice doesn't apologize. I smiled, not with joy, but with grim satisfaction. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I'd been preparing for this moment since the day Laura said, I do, to a man who thought charm was the same as character, and volume was the same as authority. Now it was time to show him the difference between noise and power. What happened when that stranger finally knocked on the door? The answer would change everything. Keep listening. You won't want to miss what comes next. Thursday morning arrived with cruel normalcy. Inside 428. Maple Street, Barry Grayson sprawled across the living room couch in yesterday's clothes. wrinkled khakis and a t-shirt that reeked of beer and stale sweat. Empty cans littered the coffee table like abandoned soldiers. His phone glowed in his hand as he scrolled mindlessly through social media, pausing occasionally to smirk at something only he found amusing. The shattered television still lay on the floor where he'd thrown it. He'd stepped over the glass twice already this morning without bothering to sweep it up. In the kitchen, Laura stood motionless at the counter, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. Mascara from yesterday smudged beneath her lashes. She hadn't slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, calm, composed, devastatingly quiet, as she walked out the door. The house felt wrong without her. Too quiet, too empty, like a body missing its spine. Laura kept glancing toward the front door, half expecting her mother to walk back in, keys jingling. Maybe with groceries or fresh flowers from the farmer's market. But the door remained closed. The key hook by the entrance sat bare. "Stop moping," Barry muttered from the couch, not looking up from his phone. "She'll be back. Where else would she go? She's got nowhere." Laura didn't answer. She gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white, and said nothing. At exactly 9:14 a.m., the doorbell rang, sharp, formal, commanding. Barry didn't move. "Get that," he said, still scrolling. Laura hesitated, then set down her coffee cup and walked slowly to the front door. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the knob. A man stood on the porch, mid-30s, charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored, white dress shirt, burgundy tie, a leather briefcase in his left hand. His expression was neutral, professional, unreadable, the kind of face that had delivered bad news many times before, and felt nothing about it. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I'm looking for Barry Grayson." Laura blinked. "That's my husband." The man extended his right hand. "Ted Cruz, associate with Leo and Martinez Law. I have documents requiring his signature acknowledgement." Barry appeared behind Laura, irritation already carved into his features. "What documents?" Ted didn't flinch at the tone. He simply opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency, removed a manila envelope, and extended it toward Barry. Barry snatched it from his hand and tore it open. His eyes scanned the first page, confusion flickering across his face, then hardening into red-hot rage. "What the hell is this?" Ted's voice didn't change pitch or volume. "Notice of eviction. You have 7 days to vacate the premises at 428 Maple Street. The property owner has initiated formal removal proceedings due to unauthorized occupancy." Barry's face flushed crimson. "What the hell are you talking about? This is my house." "According to county records filed with the clerk's office," Ted continued, as if reading from a script he'd memorized, "the sole legal owner of this property is Carrie Elizabeth Allen. Deed recorded June 14th, 1982. No co-signers, no secondary owners, no lease agreement on file." "That's bullshit!" Barry's voice cracked with fury. "I've lived here for years." 3 years and 7 months, Ted corrected, his tone still maddeningly even. "According to Mrs. Allen's documentation, as a guest, with no rental agreement, no equity stake, and no legal claim to occupancy." Laura's hands shot out and yanked the papers from Barry's grip. Her eyes flew across the text, scanning desperately. Ted turned his attention to her. "Mrs. Allen is exercising her legal right to terminate gratuitous use of her property. You are being given courtesy notice. Failure to vacate within 7 days will result in sheriff-supervised removal and potential trespassing charges." He paused, his gaze steady on Laura. "Mrs. Grayson, you may wish to consult independent legal counsel. Your name is not on this property." Laura's face went pale. Her hands trembled as she held the papers. Barry crumpled the notice in his fist and hurled it at Ted's feet. "Get the hell off my porch!" Ted didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't blink. "The notice has been served," he said quietly. "A copy has been filed with the county. Good day." He turned on his heel, walked calmly to a sleek black sedan parked at the curb, and drove away without looking back. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Laura bent down, picked up the crumpled papers from the porch, and carried them inside. She smoothed them carefully on the kitchen counter, her hands shaking, and read every word. Notice of eviction. Property owner, Carrie Elizabeth Allen. Occupants, Barry J. Grayson, Laura A. Grayson. Status, unauthorized eviction date, 7 days from service. Her voice came out small, broken. Barry, you said your name was on the house. She's lying! Barry paced like a caged animal, hands raking through his hair. He just showed us county records. It's a mistake. A bureaucratic fuck-up. Your mother's manipulating this somehow. You told me you co-signed when we moved in. Laura's voice cracked. You said you were on the deed! Barry's jaw worked. His hands clenched into fists. She can't do this. She's bluffing. This is just some scare tactic. But his voice cracked on the last word. Laura looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in what felt like years. Red-faced, sweating, cornered, trapped, and for the first time in 4 years of marriage, she wondered, who is this man I married? The eviction notice was just the beginning. What Carrie did next would strip away every lie Barry had built his life on. And Laura was about to discover just how deep those lies went. Stay with me. By Thursday afternoon, Barry had convinced himself the eviction notice was a bluff. Some desperate power play his mother-in-law would abandon once she cooled down. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, typing furiously into Google. Eviction defense strategies. Tenant rights. How to fight unlawful eviction. The screen loaded for 3 seconds, then froze. No internet connection. What the? Barry jabbed at the keyboard. Nothing. He checked the router on the counter. All the lights were off. He unplugged it, waited, plugged it back in. Still nothing. Swearing under his breath, he grabbed his phone and dialed the internet provider. The automated system droned through options until finally, mercifully, a live voice answered. This is Barry Grayson. My internet's out. Account holder name, please. Barry hesitated. Carrie Allen. But I live here. Are you listed as an authorized user on the account, Mr. Grayson? No, but I see here that the account holder requested service suspension yesterday at 8:43 p.m. Barry's grip tightened on the phone. Well, turn it back on. Only the account holder can authorize that, sir. I live here. The representative's tone didn't change. Then you're welcome to open your own account. Installation fee is $89, plus the first month of service. Click. Barry hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. Screen cracked. Laura, standing in the doorway with a dish towel in her hands, flinched, but said nothing. By 7:15 p.m., Barry had managed to calm himself down enough to settle onto the couch with a beer. The college basketball game was on. His one escape. His one moment of peace in this nightmare of a day. Then, mid-play, the screen went black. Are you kidding me? He grabbed the remote, mashing buttons. Nothing. He checked the cable box. No signal. From the kitchen, Laura's voice was quiet, almost resigned. She's doing this. Barry whipped around. Doing what? Everything's in her name, Barry. Everything. The internet, the cable, the house, the bank account. She looked at him with hollow eyes. We don't own anything. That's ridiculous. Barry stood and kicked the coffee table. It skidded across the floor, scattering beer cans. She's just trying to scare us. But Laura had already turned away. Friday morning, Barry needed gas. He pulled into the station, filled the tank, $64, and swiped the joint credit card at the pump. Declined. He tried again. Slower this time, making sure the chip reader caught it. Declined. The attendant's voice crackled over the intercom. You got another card, buddy. Face burning, Barry pulled out his personal credit card, the one that was nearly maxed out, and ran it through. This time it went through. He drove home in silence, jaw clenched, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The moment he parked, he grabbed his phone and called the bank. "This is Barry Grayson. Why is my card declining?" "Account number, please." He rattled it off. The joint account he shared with Laura, the one Carrie had set up 2 years ago for emergencies. That account has been frozen pending dispute resolution by WHO. The primary account holder, Carrie Allen. I'm her son-in-law. I use that account. Are you listed as primary or secondary holder? Sir. Secondary, but then you don't have authority to dispute the freeze. When will it be unfrozen? When Mrs. Allen authorizes it, sir. Click. At 10:02 a.m., Laura sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, using her phone's hotspot since the internet was dead. She logged into the joint savings account, the one Barry had promised was growing, the one that held her father's life insurance money, the nest egg that was supposed to secure their future. Balance, $340.82. Laura stared at the screen. It should have been $14,000, and closer to $16,000 if Barry had actually been investing it like he said. Her hands trembling, she clicked on the transaction history. Withdrawal, $1,200, ATM, Barry J. Grayson. Withdrawal, $2,500, wire transfer, Barry J. Grayson. Withdrawal, $800, cash, Barry J. Grayson. Withdrawal, $900, consulting services, Barry J. Grayson. The pattern repeated, month after month, for nearly 2 years. Laura's stomach turned to ice. She stood slowly, legs unsteady, and walked into the living room. Barry sat on the couch, head in his hands, looking more defeated than she'd ever seen him. Barry? He didn't look up. Where's the money? What money? Her voice cracked. The $14,000. From my father's life insurance. The money you said you were investing. Silence. Barry, where is it? He finally looked up. His eyes were red, defensive, cornered. We had expenses. What expenses? Laura's voice rose, shaking. I gave you $12,000 2 years ago. You said it was growing. You said we'd have $20,000 by now. Things came up. What things? The car repair, the trip to Vegas, Laura's blood turned to ice. You spent my inheritance on a Vegas trip. Barry shot to his feet. It was our money. It was my father's life insurance. For the first time in 4 years, Laura screamed at him. Barry's jaw tightened. His eyes darted, searching for an exit, an excuse, anything. Your mother's doing this. She's manipulating you, turning you against me. Laura's voice dropped to a whisper. No, Barry, you did this. You lied. She turned and walked to the bedroom. The door closed softly. The lock clicked. For the first time in 4 years, Laura slept alone. Barry's world was collapsing, piece by piece. But Carrie wasn't finished yet. The real reckoning was still to come, and it would happen in a lawyer's office, where lies can survive and the truth is written in ink. Don't miss what happens next. Monday morning, 9:45 a.m. I arrived at the offices of Leo and Martinez 15 minutes early, the way I'd arrived early to everything for the past 40 years. Punctuality, I'd learned, was a quiet form of power. Julian met me in the lobby, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, still wearing the same style of reading glasses he'd worn when we worked together 2 decades ago. His handshake was warm, familiar. You look well, Carrie. I slept for the first time in years, I said. And it was true. Saturday night, alone in that hotel room with the eviction notice filed and the accounts frozen, I'd slept like the dead. We walked down a quiet hallway lined with framed bar certifications and entered a conference room that smelled of leather and old books. Oak table, high-backed chairs. Walls lined floor to ceiling with legal volumes I'd once helped index. I sat, Hands folded in my lap, my document folder placed neatly in front of me like a closing argument. Julian reviewed his files one last time, making notes in the margins with a fountain pen. At 10:10 a.m., the door burst open. Barry stormed in as if he owned the building. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt he'd clearly slept in. His face was unshaven, eyes bloodshot. Behind him, Laura trailed like a ghost, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, dark circles carved beneath her eyes, shoulders hunched as though she were trying to disappear into herself. Barry didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, one finger jabbing toward Julian. This is insane. You can't just kick us out. Julian didn't look up from his notes. His voice was calm, measured. Please sit, Mr. Grayson. I've lived there for 3 years. Barry's voice cracked with desperation. That's adverse possession. I have rights. Julian finally lifted his gaze. He slid a single document across the polished table. Adverse possession in this state requires 10 years of continuous, open, and hostile occupancy without the owner's permission. He paused, letting the words settle. You've been there 3 years and 7 months. As Mrs. Allen's invited guest, your claim has no legal standing whatsoever. Barry stared at the paper as if it had betrayed him. Slowly, he sank into the chair across from me. I contribute. His voice was defensive now, grasping. I pay bills. Julian opened a second folder with the deliberate precision of a surgeon making an incision. Do you? He slid a spreadsheet across the table. Mrs. Allen's financial records show you've paid an average of $127 per month over 43 months. That's 8.3% of actual household costs. Barry's mouth opened, closed. She never asked for more. You're a guest, Mr. Grayson. Julian's tone was relentless but never raised. Guests don't pay rent, but they also don't claim ownership. He slid another document across the table, this one thicker, highlighted in yellow. Meanwhile, you've withdrawn $18,400 from a joint account Mrs. Allen opened in good faith for family emergencies. Laura's face went white. Barry's jaw tightened. That was our money! I spoke for the first time since they'd entered the room. My voice was quiet, clear, final. No, Barry. That was Laura's inheritance from her father. You told her you were investing it. You spent it. Laura's head snapped toward me, tears pooling in her eyes. Julian continued, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. We've also contacted your employer. Barry's eyes went wide. What? Your HR department was particularly interested to learn you've been claiming a home office deduction on your taxes for a property you don't own. The color drained from Barry's face. That's a federal tax issue, Mr. Grayson. Laura stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I need air. She walked toward the door, shoulders shaking. Barry scrambled to his feet. Laura! She held up one trembling hand. Don't. The door closed behind her with a soft, damning click. Barry stood in the hallway, alone, staring at the closed door as if it had locked him out of his own life. Inside, Julian and I sat in silence. He glanced at me. Are you all right? I nodded once. I will be. I found Laura outside on a stone bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. She was crying, not the loud, gasping kind, but the quiet, bone-deep kind that comes from years of holding everything in. I sat beside her, didn't speak, just sat. After a long moment, she whispered, I'm so sorry, Mom. I know. I should have said something. When he smashed the TV, when he called you. Her voice broke. Yes, I said. You should have. Silence stretched between us. Not angry, just true. But you're saying it now, I added softly. Laura wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smudging across her cheek. I don't know what to do. You don't have to decide today. I turned to face her fully. But Laura, you need to understand something. What? Love doesn't sound like breaking glass. It doesn't sound like get lost, old lady. And it certainly doesn't sound like silence. Laura looked at me, really looked at me, and something in her face shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but no longer numb. She nodded, and for the first time in years, she heard herself clearly. The lawyer's office had exposed Barry's lies, but the hardest battle was still ahead, because now Laura had to choose between the man who had stolen from her and the mother who had fought for her. What happened next would decide everything. Stay with me. Barry returned to 428 Maple Street alone. The house was silent. Oppressively so. Laura had texted him from the lawyer's office parking lot. 3 words. Staying at Rachel's. He tried calling her. Voicemail. Tried again. The call didn't even ring. Just went straight to that automated voice. The person you were trying to reach is not available. She'd blocked him. Barry stood in the middle of the living room, phone still pressed to his ear, and something inside him snapped. He punched the wall. His fist went through the drywall with a sickening crunch, leaving a jagged hole and white dust on his knuckles. Pain shot up his arm, but he barely felt it. He looked around the house, really looked at it, for the first time. The green velvet armchair, Carrie's, the oak coffee table with the water ring he'd made and never apologized for. Carrie's, the dishes in the kitchen cabinet, the pots and pans, the framed photos on the mantel, the rug beneath his feet, all of it, every single piece. Carrie's. Even the bed he'd been sleeping in for 3 years, the one he'd sprawled across like a king. Carrie had bought it with her first paycheck from the county recorder's office in 1987. His entire life had been built on someone else's foundation, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath him. Tuesday morning, 9:03 a.m. Barry's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him he should. Hello? Barry, this is Diane Freeman from HR. His stomach dropped. He forced his voice to sound casual. Hey, Diane, what's up? We need to discuss some concerns about your tax filings. What concerns? You've claimed it's a home office deduction for 3 consecutive years. Barry's throat tightened. So, I work from home sometimes. Company policy requires documentation for tax deductions. You listed 428 Maple Street as your residence. Do you own that property? Silence. Barry, it's complicated. We received communication from an attorney yesterday, indicating you're not on the deed and are currently being evicted. Barry's blood turned to ice. It's a family dispute. It has nothing to do with work. Diane's voice hardened. This could constitute tax fraud, Barry. We're required to report discrepancies to the IRS. And company policy is clear. Employees who falsify tax documentation face immediate termination. Wait, Diane, please. You're being placed on administrative leave pending review. Turn in your badge and laptop by end of business today. Click. Barry stared at his phone, the screen still glowing with the call log. His job, his home, his wife, all gone in 72 hours. Laura sat cross-legged on Rachel's couch, a glass of wine cradled in both hands like a lifeline. Rachel, her oldest friend, the one who'd warned her about Barry from the beginning, sat across from her, expression gentle but firm. How long has this been going on? Rachel asked quietly. What? Him treating your mom like that. Laura stared into her wine. I don't know. Years, I guess. And you never said anything? I thought... Laura's voice cracked. I thought if I kept the peace, it would get better. Did it? No. Rachel leaned forward. My therapist says silence isn't peace. It's surrender. Laura started crying, not dramatically, just quiet tears rolling down her cheeks. I watched him smash her TV. I watched him call her old lady, and I stood there like a coward and looked at the floor. You're not a coward, Rachel said softly. You're scared. Of what? Of him. Of being alone. Of being wrong about him. Laura nodded, the words settling over her like a cold, terrible truth. What if I've wasted 4 years on someone who never loved me? Her voice was barely a whisper. What if he just needed a place to live? Rachel reached over and squeezed her hand. Then you stop wasting year 5. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen. The 7 days are almost up, he said, without preamble. Do you want to proceed with the sheriff-supervised eviction? Yes. It's scheduled for Thursday, 10 a.m. I'll be there. There was a pause. Carrie, are you sure you want to watch? It can be unpleasant. I thought about the shattered television, the cruel words, the years of quiet humiliation. I need to, I said. Understood. On Wednesday night, Barry Grayson packed 2 suitcases with whatever clothes he could fit, grabbed his laptop bag, and walked out of 428 Maple Street. He didn't sweep up the broken glass, didn't wash the dishes piled in the sink, didn't turn off the lights. He just left. The house was finally empty. But the real reckoning was still to come, because when Carrie walked back through that door, she wouldn't just reclaim her home. She'd reclaim her life, and what she did next would change everything. Don't miss the final chapters. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. I stood on the sidewalk in front of 428 Maple Street, with Julian beside me, his briefcase in hand. His expression calm and professional. A sheriff's deputy, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with kind eyes, approached the front door. He knocked 3 times, firm and authoritative. Sheriff's Department, open up. No answer. He waited 30 seconds, then turned to me. I handed him the key, my key, the one I'd carried out of this house 6 days ago. The deputy unlocked the door and stepped inside. Julian and I followed. The smell hit me first. Stale air, cigarette smoke, something sour from the kitchen. Barry's clothes were gone, his toiletries cleared from the bathroom, but he'd left his mark everywhere else. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, crusted with food. Trash overflowing from the bin. Beer cans scattered across the coffee table. And in the living room, the shattered television still lay on the floor exactly where he'd thrown it. Glass glittering in the morning light. One less act of pettiness. The deputy surveyed the scene, made a note on his clipboard, and turned to me. Property is clear. Mrs. Allen, you're free to re-enter. I nodded. Thank you. Julian placed a hand on my shoulder. Do you want me to stay? No, I said quietly. I need to do this alone. He understood. He always did. After they left, I stood in the center of my living room and let the silence settle over me. This was my house. My home. Every wall, every floorboard, every window. Mine. I knelt and picked up a shard of glass from the broken television. It got the light, sharp and cold in my palm. Then I stood, walked to the kitchen, and found a trash bag. I spent the entire day cleaning. I swept up every piece of glass, vacuumed twice to make sure I'd gotten it all. I washed the dishes, scrubbing away the dried food and grease Barry had left behind. I took out the trash, all 4 bags of it. I opened every window in the house, letting the November air sweep through and carry out the stale smoke and bitterness. At 2:02 p.m., the locksmith arrived. A cheerful man in his 60s who didn't ask questions, just changed every lock in the house. Front door, back door, side gate. He handed me a new set of keys, bronze and untouched. All yours now, ma'am. Yes, I said. They are. I scrubbed the bathroom until the tiles gleamed. I washed the sheets, the towels, everything that carried the memory of someone who'd never belonged here. I wiped down counters, dusted shelves, polished the oak coffee table until I could see my reflection in it. By evening, The house smelled like lemon cleaner and lavender. Like home. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in my green velvet armchair, and looked around. It was quiet. Blessedly, beautifully quiet. Friday morning, I drove to Best Buy. The sales associate, a young woman with a bright smile, showed me the television section. Rows of massive screens, 65 inches, 75 inches, bigger than any one person could possibly need. "What size are you looking for?" she asked. I pointed to a modest 40-inch model in the corner. "That one." "Are you sure? We have some great deals on the larger." "I'm sure," I said. "I don't need his size. I need my peace." She blinked, then smiled. "I'll get someone to load it for you." 2 hours later, the installation tech mounted it on the wall, exactly where the old one had been. But somehow the space felt different now. Lighter. I sat in my green armchair, remote in hand, and turned it on. The evening news flickered to life. Familiar anchors. Familiar voices. I exhaled. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and froze. Laura stood on the porch. No key in her hand, no shopping bags. Just her, hands folded in front of her, looking small and uncertain. I opened the door. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "Of course." We sat in the living room. She took the couch. I returned to my armchair. The new television was off. The only sound was the ticking of the mantel clock. "I filed for divorce," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. I'd expected as much. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know. I should have." "Yes," I said gently. "You should have. But you're here now." Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable. Not cold. Just present. Laura looked down at her hands. "Can I stay for dinner?" "You're always welcome," I said. Then I paused, choosing my words carefully. "But Laura, you need to understand something." She looked up, eyes shining. "This is my house. You're my guest now. Not my tenant. Not my responsibility. My guest." Laura nodded slowly, understanding settling over her like a new truth she was learning to carry. "I understand." We ate spaghetti in silence. But this time, the silence wasn't betrayal. It was healing. Carrie had reclaimed her home, but her journey wasn't over yet. And what she did next would help other women find their own strength and prove that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just quietly locks the door. If this story has moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this ends. 3 months later, winter settled over the city like a quiet reckoning. Barry Grayson was living in a roadside motel on the edge of town, the kind with peeling paint and flickering neon signs that buzzed through the night. He'd lost his job. The tax fraud investigation was ongoing, and no company would touch him with a 10-foot pole once they ran a background check. The divorce papers had been served 2 weeks ago. Laura was asking for nothing. Not money, not property, not even an apology. Just her freedom. One evening, Barry worked up the courage to call Carrie. His hands shook as he dialed the number he'd once known by heart. She answered on the second ring. "Carrie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." Click. She hung up. He tried calling Laura next. The call didn't even ring. Still blocked. 2 days later, Barry's mother called Carrie, her voice shrill with indignation. "How could you do this to him? He's living in a motel, Carrie. You've ruined his life." Carrie's voice was calm, measured. "I didn't do anything to him, Helen. I simply stopped letting him do it to me." "But he's family." "No," Carrie said quietly. "He was a guest who overstayed his welcome. There's a difference." She hung up before Helen could respond. Laura was rebuilding her life one small piece at a time. She'd rented a studio apartment in a quiet neighborhood, modest, affordable, and entirely hers. The walls were bare except for a single framed photo of her and her father from years ago, back when she still knew how to smile without permission. She'd been promoted at work, assistant manager now, with a raise she'd earned through competence, not compliance. Every Tuesday evening, she went to therapy. It was hard. Some weeks, she cried through the entire session. But slowly, painfully, she was learning to hear her own voice again. Every Sunday, she visited her mother for dinner. She always rang the doorbell, never used a key, never assumed entry. One Sunday, in late February, she arrived with a bouquet of tulips, bright yellow, her mother's favorite. Carrie opened the door, surprised. "Laura, you didn't have to." "I wanted to." Laura handed her the flowers, then met her mother's eyes. "Thank you, Mom." "For what?" "For showing me what self-respect looks like." Carrie's throat tightened. She set the flowers on the hall table and pulled her daughter into a hug. The first real one they'd shared in years. "You're doing the work, sweetheart," Carrie whispered. "I just reminded you that you could." One afternoon in early March, Carrie stopped by the senior center to drop off some donated books. On the community bulletin board, a flyer caught her eye. Community workshops. Volunteers needed. Share your skills. Empower your neighbors. She stood there for a long moment, thinking. Then she pulled out her phone and called the coordinator. 2 weeks later, Carrie stood in front of 12 women in a small conference room at the senior center. They ranged in age from 62 to 78. Some looked skeptical, some looked desperate. One woman in the back, Margaret, mid-70s with silver hair and tired eyes, was crying quietly into a tissue. Carrie opened a folder and set it on the table. "Good morning. My name is Carrie Allen, and I spent 35 years working in property law. Today, I want to teach you something vitally important: how to protect what's yours." She clicked to the first slide on the projector. Understanding property rights for women over 60. "Who here owns their home?" Carrie asked. 8 hands went up. "Who here has their name on the deed?" 5 hands stayed up. 3 dropped. "Then we have work to do." Margaret raised her hand, voice trembling. "My son-in-law told me I'm a burden. He wants to sell the house and put me in a home, but it's my house. My husband left it to me." Carrie walked over and handed Margaret a fresh tissue and a blank folder. "Let me show you what documents you need." Over the next 2 hours, Carrie taught them how to read a deed and verify ownership, how to protect assets from financial abuse, how to freeze joint accounts, when to call a lawyer, and what to ask. By the 3rd session, 22 women were attending. Word had spread through church groups, book clubs, and coffee mornings. Women who'd felt powerless for years were learning that the law could be their shield, not their enemy. 4 weeks later, Carrie received a letter in the mail. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting was careful and deliberate. She opened it. "Dear Mrs. Allen, I wanted you to know I met with a lawyer. I brought the documents you told me to gather. My son-in-law is moving out next week. The house is mine. The deed is in my name. I never thought I'd get my home back. Thank you for teaching me that silence isn't peace. It's surrender. I'm done surrendering." With gratitude, Margaret Carey folded the letter carefully and placed it in a folder on her desk. A growing collection of thank you notes, updates, and small victories from women who'd found their voices again. She sat back in her chair and looked out the window at the afternoon light, filtering through the trees. Justice, Carrie learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a locked door and a woman who finally knows her worth. Carrie's story is almost over, but the legacy she's building is just beginning. In the final chapter, we'll see how one grandmother's quiet revolution changed not just her life, but the lives of dozens of women who learned that power doesn't shout. It protects. Don't miss the ending. 6 months later, spring arrived with quiet confidence. Sunday, 5 p.m. The doorbell rang, punctual, as always now. I opened the door to find Laura standing on the porch with a homemade apple pie cradled in her hands, still warm from the oven. "I used Dad's recipe," she said, almost shyly. "Then it's perfect." We cooked together that evening, something we hadn't done in years. Laura chopped vegetables while I seasoned the chicken. We moved around each other in the kitchen with an ease that felt both new and ancient, like muscle memory returning after a long illness. She set the table without being asked. We ate and talked about work, about the books she was reading, about the garden I was planning for the backyard. Small things, normal things, no mention of Barry. After dinner, we sat in the living room with coffee. Laura took the couch. I settled into my green velvet armchair. The television played softly in the background, a nature documentary about migration patterns. Laura watched the screen for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about him?" "Who?" "Barry." "No." She nodded slowly. "I do sometimes. I wonder how I let it get that bad." "You were trying to make it work." "I was trying to disappear," she corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her. There was color in her cheeks now, light in her eyes. She was still rebuilding, still healing, but she was there again. "The difference between love and control is permission," I said. "He never asked, he took. And I let him." "Yes, but you stopped." Laura met my eyes and nodded. Not with shame, with understanding. The following Saturday marked the 1-year anniversary of my workshop at the senior center. The room was packed. 40 women now attended regularly. Some new, some veterans who came back to support the others. Today's guest speaker was Julian Leo, who stood at the front of the room in his trademark reading glasses, discussing estate planning. "The most important thing you can do," he was saying, "is make sure your affairs are documented. Not assumed, not implied, documented." Heads nodded throughout the room. When he finished, a woman named Patricia stood from the back row. She was 73, silver-haired, with the kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving something terrible. "I just want to say thank you to Carrie," Patricia said, her voice steady. "A year ago, my son was stealing my Social Security checks. I thought I had to let him because he was family. Today, he's in jail for elder abuse, and I'm free." The room erupted in applause. I didn't stand, didn't bow, just smiled, not with triumph, but with deep bone-level satisfaction. This was what justice looked like when it wasn't performed for an audience. Quiet, permanent, real. After the session ended, women lingered to share their stories. 3 had successfully evicted abusive family members. 5 had frozen joint accounts. 2 had filed for divorce after decades of control disguised as love. One by one, they were reclaiming their lives. Not through shouting or confrontation, through documentation, through law, through the quiet, immovable power of knowing their rights. That evening, I returned to 428 Maple Street. The house was quiet, blessedly, beautifully quiet. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat in my green velvet armchair, the one I'd bought with my first Social Security check after Robert died, the one that had witnessed both my humiliation and my reclamation. I picked up the remote control, turned on the television, flipped through channels, news, a cooking show, a documentary, an old black and white film I'd seen a dozen times. I settled on the movie, set the remote on the armrest, and looked around my living room. The new television, smaller than Barry's monstrosity, but mine. Fresh tulips on the side table, yellow, my favorite. I'd bought them for myself yesterday. No broken glass littering the floor. No shouting echoing off the walls. No silent betrayals hovering in doorways. Just peace. People ask me sometimes if I regret being harsh. If I should have talked it out, or given him another chance. But words don't rewrite deeds. And I'd spent 43 years earning this house. Through work, through sacrifice, through a marriage built on partnership, not parasitism. I wasn't about to surrender it to a man who thought volume was the same as authority, and cruelty was the same as strength. Barry taught me nothing I didn't already know, but his violence clarified everything. Some people think revenge is loud, screaming matches, public confrontations, dramatic scenes. It's not. Revenge is quiet paperwork filed at 9 a.m. It's frozen accounts and eviction notices. It's a lawyer in a tailored suit delivering consequences in a calm, measured voice. It's a door that locks from the outside. I didn't destroy Barry Grayson. I simply stopped holding him up. And without my foundation beneath him, he collapsed under his own weight. I adjusted the volume on my television, not too loud, not too soft. Just right, because the sound of my life is set by me now, and it sounds like peace. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt dismissed, disrespected, or invisible, know this: you are not powerless. Documentation beats desperation, boundaries beat bargaining, and self-respect beats silence every single time. Hit that like button if Carrie's story moved you. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit hardest. And subscribe so you never miss another story about people who refuse to disappear. Remember, the most powerful word you'll ever learn isn't please. It's no. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.